Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I see friends, familiar faces, family. We've called, I think, over the last year or so in this initiative, we've embarked with MPA called Peer 71. And on this stage, I'm really glad we have actually a microcosm of the ecosystem that we've strived to build. We've got Leonardo here who marries ecosystems or parts of the ecosystems together, kind of matchmake them, keeps an eye out on how we're doing. Data from all over the world, we've heard from him, and I thank him for reiterating our purpose and our objective, and I'm so glad that we're part of that pioneering open accelerator. Sometimes I find it difficult to have to explain what is it that we're doing, because it is also a little bit experimental, it's not very classical. With Michael also, the encouragement and his decision and his team's decision to be here, we are learning a lot from him, very encouraged, and we hope to work closer together as well. With Alton, who, as from a corporate perspective, has provided the demand and the support for the startups. And we welcome, for me, a new friend, hopefully soon to be part of our extended family, Nir from Israel. And because we are all fairly familiar with the first three, I thought I will invite Nir to share very quickly a little bit about where he comes from and what he does. If you take that few minutes, Nir.
Thank you. With the slide here?
The slides on this.
Oh, thank you. So thank you, Don. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I will talk a little briefly about where I'm coming from, the DOC. We are an innovation hub, accelerator, and early stage fund for startups dealing with the shipping, ports, and logistics sector. We formed 2 years ago by Hanan Carmeli and myself based on 2 observations. One is that the digital platforms and the maritime sector is becoming to a tipping point when you're ready to adopt startups, collaboration, connectivity, and technologies that will enhance its development in the future. The second is that we are located in the startup nation. Sometimes we brag too much about it, but there is something special about the vibrant ecosystem. And we believe we have in Israel all the technology know-how to support all the technologies and the needs of the global maritime sector. We believe that we have the recipe to bring together these two ends. 2 years ago, there was no significant startup ecosystem in Israel that looked into the maritime sector, and we formed the DOC to bring those two ends together. This is the DOC in one slide. As my colleagues here presented, we are bringing together in Israel entrepreneurs, corporate partners, and investors to inject money to the startups that are relevant for the corporates. Till here about vision and why. And next slide is about execution, what we achieved in the last 2 years. We already invest in 10 early stage startups that gain traction from the corporates that we are collaborating with. And we raised the fund to support those startups. I'm glad to announce that yesterday also announced in the news that PSA and Box also joined to the DOC platform as a strategic partner. Thank you, Elton, for the support and trust, and I'm sure we will deliver great things together for the future maritime ecosystem. This is our roadmap. This is Leihun. Our roadmap, we didn't coordinate it before. Is to establish a first dedicated maritime VC fund that will support startups in the sector, and this is the team that I'm part of it. You can see me here when I was a little bit younger, and thank you very much for the opportunity to present.
Thank you. Now I'm going to do something a little bit different and dive straight into the questions, because observing the various sessions of the last week, I find that towards the end there are good questions and we often don't have the time to ask those questions. The title of this panel it's collaborating within the maritime industry to create a vibrant maritime innovation ecosystem. So I take it as a given. We all understand that collaboration is important. Now I'm going to ask the panel, so what are the impediments to collaboration, or this, from your perspective, what are the challenges to collaboration? And if in the same breath you want to suggest tips to overcome it from your perspective, that would be helpful.
Yes. So impediments to collaboration. Well, in general, is the scarcity mindset, and it seems to go against what Michael mentioned before, and that the most important things are the scarce ones, which is true. And I mentioned before that there are thousands of startups, but also Michael sort of points out very clearly that the really good ones might be very few. So there is this scarcity component that makes us competing. But on the other side, I think that to be able to, one, spot the potentially successful ones, and even before that, allow them to thrive before they can show their real potential, we need to create a collaborative system so that they can come to the surface. And then, maybe at that point, we might want to compete for them. But I think that in that case, it's a good competition. I've seen startups, like good startups, participate to more than one accelerator program. That's great. So where's the competition? Yeah, the competition might be, I want to invest 51% in this startup or 99% in this startup because it becomes mine. But I don't think this is the core issue as an industry. The core issue as an industry is we want that startup to succeed. So this is this halfway between collaboration and competition.
So I think if you're talking about collaboration between startups and corporates, for example, I think the general challenges are that too little comes out of it on both sides. There is too little return on investment. Corporates don't typically know how to work with startups. Startups typically don't know how to work with corporates. And so this isn't like rocket science that you need to solve that. But so here in Singapore, we run the NG factory or lab. And this is literally a factory of running POCs and pilots together with startups and a big corporate. You need to be very clear about what is it either party wants to get out of it when they come in, IP, what are the goals. You need to run a very strict process, 2-3 months, and then you need to have a benefit at the end of that, because that's the only way that corporates are going to be able to reinvest. It's also the only way that they're going to come back to the ecosystem and say, I want more. I think this is where many ecosystems fail, because you have startups that might be immature, too early, or might just not have the right framework to actually collaborate. But if you solve that, we're seeing tremendous interest in doing this. I think lots of Fortune 500s have admitted, they're not going to create everything for themselves. And they can see the speed at which tech is being adopted and applied by startups. I think they'd much rather ride that wave.
And on that, so would that also mean that corporates need a little bit when you mention patience, and it's not all the time that we get a return. So would they need to be educated, particularly maritime corporates, to be more forgiving or more patient in that sense? Maybe Alton can take that.
I was going to say that in the context of the maritime industry, if you look at innovation within this industry, a lot of it, I wouldn't say all of it, but a lot of it would have to involve corporates. Why? Because this is generally a B2B business. So you're right, corporates need to play their part. Unfortunately, I offer a few observations, right, and then not to point fingers, and certainly some of those fingers are pointed at ourselves too. But corporates are generally rather selfish entities, right, because they're looking out for their own commercial interests. And part of those commercial interests would include not just what do I want from the startup, what do I want from them now, rather than how patient am I willing to be to incubate and to work with them and to fund them over a longer period of time. Also, on the part of corporates, we are also potentially also competing with other corporates within the same industry. So there is a bit of a competitive pressure in there. And unfortunately, some of the really good solutions that could actually solve some of the industry problems actually would require a certain amount of collaboration across the industry, across the corporates within those industry, across that industry. So I guess that's the challenge. I'm not sure if I've got the answer to that, but certainly forums such as Peer 71, I call it a forum, why? Because it brings together corporates in a setting that allows them to have a very constructive dialogue of what is good for the industry, what are the solutions out there, and if those solutions, well, usually it's painfully obvious that those solutions won't work if just only one corporate is going to step up and support it. It usually involves a larger group of corporates coming together.
Thank you. And Neil, from your perspective, from your work done with the dog in Israel for the last few years, what types of challenges have you seen or have you overcome, perhaps, in this overcoming collaboration?
So I want to support the words of Elton about, unlike retail or tourism, we are a massive B2B industry, and we cannot ignore the challenges here that the corporates have to collaborate with startups. So we have to solve it. First of all, I'm happy to say that from most of the corporates that we meet today, most of them nominated new executive roles such as Chief Digital Officer, VP Strategy. This is a very good news because this is executive people that come, get up in the morning without the headache of the customers that angry when something in the IT infrastructure doesn't work. So first of all, I'm happy to say that all around the world there is more and more executive position like this in corporates, something great for the industry. And second of all, we at the DOC take this undertaking to bridge this enormous gap between 10 early stage startups in a small room to a big corporate. I think that the most challenging way is, like you mentioned here, how any of them get value. And to get value is meaning actively working with some MVP, minimal viable product that gives something for the corporate. It could be a very small pilot, but it should be proof of concept that enlightens the eyes of the corporate, that will say, okay, if I will do this over and over or scale it to the entire organization, it will help. The startup in B2B industry cannot thrive without this feedback from the market at very early stage. I think it's too short here in the panel to give all the idea how to do it, but at least we are wide open regarding about this challenging gap.
And I think from our observation with running Peer 71 the last year, at least the feedback that we received, to your point about corporates are increasingly setting up separate or independent teams to look at innovation, engaging with startups, is that the communication out must be very clear. Sometimes that openness to engage with the startups gets confused, and it takes many layers within corporates to reach the right person. So even if it is a digital office, it needs to that access has to be very clear. So for the corporates in this room, that's one tip or one reflection. From a startup perspective, the next round of questions is, for true collaboration, one of the fears is IP. So that is one of the questions that's come up from the audience, and I believe it could be from startups in this room. It is how do we approach the topic of IPs startups fear their IP is being taken over by corporates, and also sometimes when you work with corporates want to monopolize that startup, to the point earlier that one of the speakers made about the misunderstanding of approaching startups, working with startups versus procuring, which corporates are very used to. So on the point of IP, perhaps if you could give and share your views of how it is, how it could be, or even challenges.
Yes, thank you. So I think that IP is a very important issue, but for many startups, what I observe, particularly working at very early stages, it is misleading for them because they get obsessed with protecting their IP even before they even have a case that their IP might be relevant. And so they simply don't go out. It's like, I have this thing that is so important for me, I cannot protect it because, whatever, I don't have money enough, or I will not tell anyone, I keep it for myself, and then, well, nothing happens. And there is one sort of recurring theme in Silicon Valley, not particularly in our sector, of course, which is what counts of ideas is execution, is not the idea itself. So before thinking protecting your IP, or maybe you do protect your IP, but the first thing you have to do is to execute on this idea and make it actual and real so that you can start testing it. And a corporate doesn't have the time, the bandwidth, not even the structure to act on your great idea. Because that great idea, probably they had it already. The point is that you as a startup are in the position to act on new ideas and develop them in a way that the corporate is not able to. And that's what the corporate is looking for from you. So don't get obsessed on IP. Do protect yourself, but don't make it your first priority. Your first priority is to start engaging. And then when you prove to yourself that this is a good idea, then start protecting.
So I definitely second that. I think so. There are many ways today. I think startups can protect their IP. Some of the ways that are meaningful with corporate collaboration is shared IP, I think, or co-created IP or white labeling. That still allows both parties to get what they want. But I think to second the point, then increasingly IP is, I wouldn't say relevant, but speed is much more important than IP is. And if you look at a domain like AI, it's almost becoming irrelevant. So the guys I mentioned before, Element AI, coined the term AI first as a business model. And this was basically founded on the fact that it's an industry that moves so fast. It doesn't matter what you IP. What you IP yesterday is legacy tomorrow. So really what they came in and said, well, you need to be domain leader and you need to be a cost leader to be able to be good. This is really, I think, also what startups need to do. They're not in an entire domain, but for their specific piece, they really need to come in with something that's super cost effective, as well as knowing that particular industry or that particular piece that they're solving so well that they're the best at doing it, because that allows them to accelerate.
All right, I'll just comment on that in a slightly different way without addressing IP directly. But I guess one way of dealing with this IP issue on the side of the corporates and from the startups' point of view is firstly for the startups to understand that however large a corporate they are working with at that particular point in time, that is probably not the only corporate customer they want to have in the future. Right? They're going after a much bigger market than that. And on the corporate side also to understand that that a startup needs to create a business that is going to be beyond what the corporate is going to be able to provide them in the form of business, and you really need to give the space for that startup to do that. So I think if both sides understand it, I think it will very easily come to a sensible way of addressing IP.
I agree with all that mentioned. I think that IP is overrated. You mentioned Jack Ma and Alibaba. Does Alibaba platform as an IP? Does Flexport, that get $1 billion investment from Flexport, have an IP on their technology? The answer is probably no. You need to run fast with your idea, as Leonardo mentioned, to execute. If you have a great idea, a great business model, run like hell to execute it, and reach to the point, to the tipping point, when the corporate will get attention on your startup and will say build or buy. You will say it's better to buy them or to buy their products than build this internally. This is my advice to entrepreneurs and innovators.
Thank you. And on that, I think I segue into one of the popular questions here about how different initiatives can work together. And the question, because the panelists cannot see what you're asked, the screen is a little bit below. So essentially, the audience is asking how different initiatives like Startup Wall, the DOG, Peer71 Rainmaking, corporate accelerators can work together beyond MOUs. And in that light, I think the answer is, it's not, we are in a season. For me, developing ecosystems is also seasonal. And right now, the season for the maritime is still very nascent in startup, particularly, and the opportunities to collaborate it's tremendous. So working together beyond MOUs, for instance, the very specific example of different accelerator programs in other industry. We have startups that go from accelerator program to accelerator program. Right now, we need more of that in maritime, so we welcome more. And that's an example of how we could work together. One is a funnel or pipeline into the other. And beyond MOUs, just for these few alone, we are working on concrete examples and activities and events. The next question is around problem statements. So I think this is interesting because how do we get, first of all, within maritime industry for corporates to share more openly their problems and more genuinely also, because sometimes this being a pretty traditional and closed industry, you may be more wary if on innovation or startups or engaging differently, you may be more wary of sharing. How can we encourage them to be more open? Also, how do we encourage those outside the maritime industry to reimagine or to understand your problem statements here?
Yes, thank you. I think that one interesting case here is what New York NYMIC did recently with Professor Chris Clout. They did a reverse pitch session, a number of sessions, where they gathered from the industry which are the pain points, and they published this in a document. And I think that this is something that we should extend to all accelerators and hubs around the world, because this is a way to collect real pain points from the industry. Having said that, there is one tricky part here, because when you ask, how was that? Henry Ford said, if you ask the clients what they want faster horses. They don't want cars because they don't know what cars are, at that time. And this is the problem the risk you run by asking the industry, what are your pain points? Most likely you will find very interesting areas for incremental innovation, which is great, it's fine for the industry, it's needed, there is value there, and for a startup it could be a very interesting area to work with. But on the other side, what we're mentioning is how do we get outsiders to think inside the industry. And another example on this, which is very interesting, is Flexport. Flexport, last investment over 1 billion, valuation at the same level as Inmarsat. Inmarsat got acquired for approximately the same money as the current valuation of Flexport. Flexport is a few guys, but a few guys now, I think it's 8 people, but I mean, it's a much smaller company than Inmarsat. But the point is that when they started disrupting freight forwarding, which is not strictly maritime is just part of it, but whatever. But, when they started disrupting freight forwarding, they say, I don't know if it's just a nice pitch that they do, but they say, for the first year we didn't even know what freight forwarding meant, but they were disrupting it because they were coming from outside and had a problem as users, and they changed it. So now what we have to do, and sorry I keep talking about other people, but what we have to do is to, yes, so you cannot stop me. We have to show the outsiders of the importance and the value and the relevance of our industry, and actually, possibly, some blue ocean ideas could come out from outside, from the AI guys that have crazy ideas they are years ahead than the industry, and they can say, why guys, why don't you do this? And they do it, and they help us really change and explore and find great innovation and
So I'll just jump right in. On the topic of problem statements, I think if you want to have good problem statements coming out from industry, the people that are providing those problem statements need to be fully aware of what are the emerging technologies that are going to be available to them, and how these and how to make sense of all these emerging technologies as to how that our industry can evolve into. Otherwise, I agree with Leonardo. You get very incremental improvement type problem statements trying to address very immediate problems, but problems only because the process is what it is today, and not what the process could be if you adopt a totally different approach. So I just want to make that point regarding problem statements. I thought perhaps more could be gotten out of soliciting problem statements by perhaps holding design thinking type of engagements, right? Where people with very good and very specific technology and or skills can come in and mingle with industry and really delve deep into really what is behind those issues that they have raised.
I think that thanks to people like executive like Elton today in the industry, there is great exposure of maritime challenges and the challenges statements from corporates. We know the same from Wärtsilä, which we partner with, and it's doing great. The problem is to articulate it to entrepreneurs and to innovators outside the industry to gain really not incremental but new ideas. Maybe a question to the audience. How many entrepreneurs there is in the audience? Raise your hand. Less than 10? Raise your hand high. Okay. And how many investors there is in the audience? You see, we're talking about innovation ecosystems, and we primarily here corporates, organizations, know enough innovators and not enough investors in the audience. So we all need to do better maybe next time, and we will improve ourselves. But this is the challenge, to bring insight. On the money, there is competition from every sector in the world. On the entrepreneurs, the same. So the challenge is to take these beautiful challenge statements and to articulate it outside the maritime industry to the broader audience.
And on that note, as from the perspective of an education institution, I think there's a lot of education. The first, which we have coined a new vocabulary amongst ourselves, is there's no problem statements. The corporates that we engage with and when we speak with them, particularly those executives who matter, right, or 2 or 3 layers, their problems are very worrying. They don't want anybody to know that there are problems. Our vocabulary is innovation opportunities. And then when we say, we're helping you develop innovation opportunities, first of all, boardroom understands that. Secondly, it sounds a lot better. So we say the same thing, but in a different way. So I think it's a mindset change. And when we have the observation that we have in running the workshops is we can't run enough of them fast enough, or more of them frequently enough to touch all the people who matter. We are often seeing only in the context here within Singapore, we have many different organizations, different sizes, just within maritime, as we have come to understand. We continually see the big names and only a fraction of the teams in the big names. So to Elton's point about, and I like to borrow Ford's analogy about faster horses, it is very obvious that we are currently at that stage where we're only solving things very transactional, perhaps in some ways. So there's still a lot to go, perhaps education and pervasive education in many different ways. It's not just people need to be exposed in terms of mindset in many different ways, not just one path. Sorry, Michael, if you have anything to add on that point before we move on.
Yeah, maybe just quickly. So I think that the problem with problem statements is that they are about problems. Because, so Blue Ocean, for example, is there a problem? We can't see it, right? So you can't articulate it. And I think it goes to the issue of, again, the industry focusing on the industry itself. That's not where you find the most interesting problems. And when you ask the customers of the industry, then you find things that are both blue ocean and that are real big problems. So instead of asking Maersk Line what they have with the problem, go and ask IKEA. Instead of asking TK or somebody like that, go and ask BP, go and ask BHP. It's a much better way. They have much more money to spend on developing solutions and adopting. It's a much bigger pain. I think we see too little of that, much too little of that happening today. I also think on the problem issue, it's putting in the hands of the corporate to articulate it or identify it, I think is fundamentally wrong. They're not entrepreneurs, most of them, and they you go to a CIO or a CDO, they're not even the guys who own the pain points, so it's not really good. I think we need to get beyond that point and just put it on ourselves to go out and actually do some analysis and see where is there really a big pain point. If I go to 100 guys, will 90 of them come up and say, yeah, I'd like to actually invest in that?
Thank you. I think those are very good ideas that have been shared. Earlier, Nir did his poll, and that leads me to the next question that's coming from the audience. And I actually like to paraphrase that because obviously there's a lack. The question for the panelists, is there a lack of VCs that understand this sector well? And whether there's a need for Sequoia, Y Combinator that has been quoted, or equivalent for our sector. I think the question is, if I may paraphrase that, what do we need to do to encourage more VCs or more funding sources? Would you like to take that from either one, the ends of this room?
I will say that I saw the question. The answer is look at any other sector, automotive sector, fintech sector, insurtech sector, name it. They have today around the world few or even more dedicated VCs that are also the first choice of the entrepreneurs to go to because they have the value creation machine and the network in the specific market. We have to have the same in the sector. It's yet to prove yet, but I believe that following panels like this and activities between startups and corporates, we will see emerging maritime dedicated VC in the next 2 or 3 years. For the investors in the audience, I will say that this is the time to engage because 5 years from now it will not be something new. The valuation will be too high. There will be already global hype about startups, like happened today in the, let's say, autonomous car market. So now it's the time to engage and to invest in dedicated VC.
Ideas about how we could increase VC interest in this sector.
So maybe just on the latter question, I think if you actually do the analysis, then VC money goes a little bit like you have a small wave and then you have a tsunami, and it's because of the rounds that they follow. So they go in, they place a small bet, they place hundreds of them, and then they do the follow-ons year or 2 years after. We've already seen the first part. Tsunami definitely is coming. You can see it. It's in every industry. It's everywhere you look. I don't think there is a lack of VC money. I also think there's a lot of VC funds that they don't, just like startups don't call themselves maritime something AI. Then VCs don't call themselves maritime something, but they're investing in maritime. Very clearly, either in things that we might not just consider purely maritime, but actually touches very much on maritime. Or they're directly investing into it, but their fund is called something else. But maybe to the point on how do you get more for a specific ecosystem like Singapore, I think it's about getting and fast-tracking super sexy startups. I don't think there's any way around.
So I think you're right. There are actually very, very few VCs that claim themselves to be thoroughly focused in this industry. And I guess that's also a reflection of the size of this industry being a niche within a much larger global market, right? So this is really a very niche industry. You're going to find very few VCs doing that. But having said that, there are already some VCs that are focused thoroughly on this sector, be it maritime or supply chain, but these tend to be rather small ones. And I guess the challenge then is how do you get the big guys also interested? Given that the big guys are already scaling broadly and they will pick up these opportunities when they reach a certain level of when these opportunities are mature. So they will pick it up eventually. But how do you then get them to form maybe say dedicated teams that are focused on this vertical? I guess that maybe is the challenge now.
I think that I totally agree, and I share this. The investors need, same as entrepreneurs, same as everybody, they need to know that we exist. And it sounds like a cry between the few that feel sort of neglected or rejected. But the point is that our industry is incredibly hidden and not even misunderstood, but not even known to the vast majority. And the vast majority is citizens with, okay, fine, they just use our services without knowing. But citizens is also entrepreneurs, and to some extent is also the investors. Investors have keep, of course, their eyes more open. And I can tell that from our publication of the infographic, we saw a growing interest from investors that contact us and say, how do I get involved in maritime? How do I get involved with startups in maritime? So, I see what we do as a way of educating the outside of the industry about the merits and the value of the industry. And I can say that there are investors, like serious big investors, that are considering to establish specific maritime sections or verticals. And I think overall it's a matter of reaching a critical mass. That's why there are 3 investors in this room and 10 startups. Because we talk among us and we know what we are talking, but if any one of us talk about startup to a company that is out of our circle, and they will say, oh, what is a startup? Oh, it's an SME, which is true, but it's totally irrelevant and mistaken, because it's a completely different thing. It's not just a supplier, it's something else. So we have to educate on this and create critical mass. Create critical mass through education towards outside.
I'd like to add on a little bit more regarding the comment on whether or not there should be dedicated VCs for this sector. I think if that comment was along the lines of should we set up one or should someone set up one, then I think actually I would support that. Why? Because really this industry is such a niche industry, we really need to get some support on the onside, especially from the funding side. And I agree there is a lot of money out there, but a lot of the money is not looking at this space right now. So having that dedicated VC would actually help. But having said that, I also would encourage that whoever is setting up that dedicated VC to be absolutely disciplined in terms of thinking of investing purely for returns purposes. No doubt you're doing this to encourage the growth of this industry, but we want the startups that get funded also to have a lot of credibility. So we want smart money also.
Yeah, and I think like I started the encouragement. I feel very encouraged because of all the sincere efforts from different parties coming together, particularly in Singapore. Right now, we have many things to do. It's very nascent, but everybody is doing our own small bits. And we heard earlier from Ted, from Lee Hoon about possible very happy news in the fourth quarter of this year. So we're going to hold them to that now that they've announced it publicly. So I think to reassure those who are looking seriously and sometimes feel a bit discouraged from the various hurdles that we might feel, have patience. From my experience growing startups like Carousel, which is in the papers today, it takes a long time. So maybe sometimes years, a period of time to grow this. But suffice to say, these important elements of a vibrant ecosystem are being looked into at different rates, but I dare say equal amounts of intensity right now by all the different players. We only have, I think, about 5 minutes left to the panel. I just want to give the panelists perhaps a chance to share any pointers or last messages before we round up. Neil? It's Neil's first visit to Singapore. I hope he leaves sufficiently encouraged to come back again and again.
I hope it will not be the last. I'm sure it won't be the last. I just visited yesterday PSA offices and ports and was very impressed and looking forward to collaborate with other stakeholders in Singapore. Our message is simple. Entrepreneurs, investors, corporate partners out there, we want to speak with you, we want to interact with you, we want to give you value and get value from you. Any investor, any entrepreneur in the room, any corporate partner, welcome to address me. We have a very structured process and oil machine, how to enjoy this ecosystem, to give something and to get something in return, and looking forward to it. Thank you.
Right. Similarly, PSA Unboxed, we are definitely very interested in talking to not only startups but also potential collaborators within the maritime ports and supply chain ecosystems, right? Be it funders, ecosystem players, and startups. And really, we are just looking forward to talking to you and exchanging ideas. And if something comes out of it, that's great. Thanks.
Yeah, so the last thing maybe from here to leave you with is, so decarbonizing the supply chain is super difficult. And it's super difficult to get like really strong AI companies to care about this industry. But we have set out the mission. We want the second half of this year. We want to do this with a large number of corporates. We want to put it here in Singapore and make it happen here. And next year we want to do it even in a bigger way. And I think it's possible. So anybody who has an interest in this, who cares a little bit about their kids who has to live with climate change, just to guild you guys to approach us, and we'd be happy to work with you.
Okay, for me, so same as above. Investors, startups, industry, we want to get in touch with you so that we can really help exchange and interact among all the stakeholders. And I think that what is great, I see here now we are four slightly different perspectives on what an accelerator should be and do here on the panel. And it's great how things changed since the last 4 years. 4 years ago, there were already some initiatives. Everything was closed. No one knew which startups were inside the walled garden. Now, all of us are open up and show the startups to the world so that it is more collaborative. It's not just for me, for my company. So this is already a great achievement. Thank you.
And I think for maritime, one of the, as I said earlier, in terms of education, in terms of exposure, it's continuous and it comes to us on all levels. One idea perhaps is that for a maritime conference or event like this, but to bring in more examples from outside the industry, more success stories outside the industry to inspire new thinking from all ways, perhaps in your publications where it's only C3, to have one or two sections outside of ideas outside the maritime industry. That's one way of education. And on that note, I like metaphors, analogies. To borrow an African quote. For me, it's on land. Personally, maritime is very new for me. I need to find a proverb for maritime, but to borrow an African quote, to say that to run far, we run alone. But to run fast, we run alone. But to run far, we run together. And in Singapore, I think we're one big kampong. We're very happy to run. We work towards running far together. Thank you.
Thank you. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Let us go far. Let's go together.